Welcome to Busy Bee Sewing Projects. Today I'm going to show you how to make a scrap quilt. Now this is just a really quick except for cutting all the pieces, but it's an easy way to make a quilt. So if you're new to quilting, this is a great way to start. I'm not going to get all fussy with a lot of details and bog you down in a lot of rules. So if you're just new to quilting, or if you want to make something quick that you can actually use for every day, this is a good video. If you're looking to improve on your quilting skills that you already have, or if you're looking to make like an heirloom quilt or something to show at the state fair, this is probably not the best video because I'm going to skip a lot of those steps that make a quilt really precise and accurate. So you have a great day. Let's get started by talking about what you need to cut. Now, part of your quilt is going to be made up of these little squares, and they are 3 by 3. So I've cut them 3 inches by 3 inches, and you're going to need to cut 220 of these. So you need 220 of the 3 by 3, and then you're going to sew them into 10 strips. So you want 10 strips, and if you're good at math, you can figure out that there's going to be 22 pieces in each strip. So 220 of these into 10 strips with 22 in each strip. And this is what a strip looks like. You're just going to sew them together end to end. You're going to want 22 of them. And you should have enough to do 10 of these. Alright, so there's your small ones, your little 3 by 3. The next size you need is 5 by 5. Now, if I could do this over, I would have made these different sizes, but I'm using scraps, and I already had a bunch of squares cut in 3 by 3 and 5 by 5 from other scrap quilts, and I didn't have enough of either one, so I'm combining them to make one big scrap quilt. So, of the 5 by 5s, you need to cut 120, and you're going to do 10 strips, but you only need 12 pieces in each strip. So these strips are going to be, I think, about 55 inches long, and these are going to be about 54 inches long. It doesn't quite work out even, but when you get done you can just trim off the extra. So the next thing you need to cut is your in-between strips. I don't like scrap quilts usually because they're so busy, and one way I break up the busyness is to put a solid color strip in between all of these busy strips. So you're going to want to cut these. Now I did them 1.5 by 55. So they're pretty long. So 1.5 by 55. You're going to want 19 strips, and that's enough to go in between each one of these, because this gives you a total of 20 strips, and if we go in between each one, that's 19. Then when you get all done cutting out all your pieces, you can start sewing them together. Okay, here's a trick for sewing pieces together. This speeds it up a little bit. You put a piece in, and we're going to be using 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, so I turn it on, sew it. Now in traditional sewing right now, I would take it out, open it up, line up my next piece, and sew it on. But I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to stick my next 2 pieces in. I've got 2 squares here lined up, and I'm just going to keep going. And time for the next 2. For these scrap quilts, I try to take all the pieces and I just try to like really jumble them up and shake them all together, because when you cut them, they end up kind of grouped with light colors. Just kind of get all your pieces shaken up and mixed up, and just sew them together. Then after you have all your pieces sewn together like that, you end up with these really long strips of these connected. And now you can cut them apart. I have a little cutter on the side of my machine. Cut them apart, and now you can open up all these pieces that you have together and match them up, and just do the same thing. Just keep feeding them through, making sure, whoops, those are the same print. I'm going to swap it and just feed it through. So don't just take each single piece out individually. Just run a whole bunch through, then match those up and run them through. At some point you have to do your math, because you end up with 2, 4, then it goes to 8. Oh wait, I need a row of 22. 8 times 3 is 24. So occasionally I have to backtrack and take a few off because I end up with too many. But anyway, that's my trick for sewing them together. Alright, I've got all my strips sewn together, and I've got two piles. I've got a pile of skinny strips, a pile of fat strips, and then of course I have all my straight in between pieces. And now I'm just going to alternate. I'm going to do a fat strip, solid, and a skinny, and then another solid, and on and on and on. This is the fun part because you can really see your quilt starting to come together. So let me show you what I've got so far. So I had a fat, solid, skinny, solid, fat, skinny, narrow. And I always start from the same end. So this end is nice and straight because I always start from this end and go the opposite direction. See, where am I up to? I'm up to this, so I'm just going to put it in my machine. I'm going to take my next piece. My last one was a fat, so now I'm going to do a narrow, line it up, and stitch it using 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now, if you look at my other end, it's not nearly so straight, because if you did your math, you realize that my actually, I told you to put an extra one on here. Mine are ending up, my little ones are ending up narrow, but I had you add an extra one on because I think I'm going to go back and do that. Anyway, it's not at all level on this end, so what you're going to have to do when you get done is cut it off. And I'll show you how to do that here in a bit. I still don't have all my strips together though. I just kind of wanted to give you an idea what you need to do, so just start sewing them together in that. Okay, I've got all my strips sewed together, and now your blue ones won't be quite this long. I think I told you 55 inches, and so they're going to be about the same as these. But we need to trim off our rows, so taking either a scissors or a rotary cutter, we're just going to go, and we're going to straighten things up. Then when you get it all straightened up and squared up, measure it and add a few inches to that for your back piece. You can be flexible with your back if you have some chunks of big print fabric that you were going to use and never did. You can use those. You could go buy some solid color. I have a sheet. It's actually a brand new sheet, but it was never used, so I'm going to use that. Now here I'm off quite a bit, so I think I'm just going to kind of split the difference a little bit. Wow, it's crooked. Well, that's the way scrap quilts are. They get kind of crooked. So I'm just going to kind of trim it. So, and always cut your back a few inches bigger than your quilt top. And that way we'll trim it to size later. And the other thing you need is batting. You're going to need some batting. I prefer kind of a medium weight. I don't want it really thick because it's going to be too heavy for little kids who use, but I don't want it to be really thin either because it'll just be cheap. So pick out some batting that's kind of a medium weight and get some backing fabric. Okay, this is what I've been doing. I took it and I laid it out on the room that I had pretty big, and I laid the batting out on the floor. It's kind of nice and stretched it a little bit to get it nice and smooth. I like to lay it on carpeting because it kind of sticks to the carpeting. And then I put my backing fabric right side up, and then I put my quilt wrong side down. So I basically have a 3-layer sandwich: batting, fabric, and fabric. And the fabric I have right sides together. Sorry if the lighting's not very good. I had to go up to my daughter's room because there's a bunch of boys playing Super Smash Brothers in the basement where my sewing room is, so it's very noisy right now. Okay, so you can see I cut the batting and the backing quite large, and that gives you plenty of room to play with it and move it around. So, and after I got it all laid out and kind of tugged, stretched, and smooth, I've gone along and I put lots of pins in it just to hold it, and I'll put it in my machine and I'll sew it all the way around. I'll probably sew a little bit bigger than the 1/4 inch, maybe more like about a 1/2 inch. I'm actually just going to line this up with the edge of my foot, which is a little wider on my machine than the 1/4 inch. And then after I sew it all the way around, I'll trim off the extra. And that way, if it travels and I need it to be a little bit bigger or smaller, I have flexibility that way. What was I going to say? The batting, the pre-cut batting that came in the rolls only came 90 inches wide, and this was a little bigger than that. So I got the stuff that you buy by the yard, because that comes 96 inches wide, and then you can get it more exactly what you want width-wise. So, oh, what I was going to say is when you sew all the way around, leave an opening. So in one of your spots, leave about that much open, you know, maybe a foot, 9 inches, because you're going to have to turn this right side out. Obviously it's going to be done inside out. So, alright, I'm going to go sew all the way around, leaving an opening, and then after I sew it, I'm going to trim off all my extra fabric and batting, and then you get to flip it right side out. Have fun! Okay, I've got it all flipped right side out. Of course I have my hole, and I left a gap that was just these 2 big squares long. That wasn't big enough, so leave bigger than that. That was only about, would that be about 9 inches? It was tight. So now you have to stitch this hole shut. So what you want to do is you just want to kind of fold over your seam allowance. Make sure you get some batting in there. So just kind of tuck it over, get it lined up, and then pin it. Do that all the way down. So pretending I've done that all the way down, and then you just want to take a needle and thread and tack it shut. So once you have that all pinned and tacked, you're ready for the next step, which is to tie it. Now the purpose of tying is to keep your layers from shifting and to keep your batting from settling. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay this out on the floor and get it all lined up straight, and then I'm going to put safety pins in it every so often. And I have the special safety pins that, well, let me show you one. They have special quilting safety pins, and instead of a flat bottom, they're kind of a curved shape. Those work really good. You could just use regular safety pins too. Or you could use pins, but it's not very good on your lap if it's got pins in it. Then you're just going to go and pin it every so often. And once it's all pinned, then you can sit on the couch and tie it to get it together. Now to tie it, you can use either like a lightweight yarn, like a baby yarn, or you can use some, this is called pearl cotton. You could use some of that. And when I get to that step, I'll show you how to do that. So right now I'm just going to get this pinned and stitched shut. Okay, I laid my quilt out and decided where I wanted to put my ties. And I also put a bunch of safety pins in it to hold it together. And I'm going to put my ties in the big squares. I'm going to go every other square. So in this row I'll do like 1, 3, 5. And then in this row I'm going to do like square 2, 4, 6, 8. So it'll be here, here, and then the next row will be here. I'm going to skip the skinny rows. Anyway, you want these, I don't know, 6 to 9 inches apart. Mine are probably a little farther. A hand span's kind of a good guesstimate for distance. What I'm going to use is kind of sparkly purple yarn I found. And to do this, I actually pinned in the squares I don't want ties to make it a little bit easier. So I'm just going to kind of guesstimate the middle, make sure it's smooth. I'm going to come up, oops, I'm going to go down. And you kind of want your stitches to form the 4 corners of a square. So think of that's one corner, and then I want to go next to it. And then across. And then up in this corner. So there's my ties have done basically 4 corners. I'm going to cut my thread and tie a knot. And that is how you tie your quilt. And this keeps your layers together. Nice tight little tie. If you want them short, you can cut them off. I like them kind of short. There. As soon as you're done with all those ties, you are done with your quilt. And take your pins out. And while I'm doing these ties, I'm also going to be on the watch out for threads. And I'm going to be clipping any stray threads. So I hope you enjoyed this project and have fun quilting. Have a great day.